Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices is made possible in part by Allstate, the Searle Funds at the Chicago Community Trust, and CIBC.
Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices. I'm Phil Ponce. Thank you for sharing part of your weekend with us. On the show tonight, a new grid of bike routes comes to two predominantly Latino neighborhoods. A look at the push for fairness in transportation. A new Target warehouse opens in Little Village, drawing new job opportunities, but also community concerns. A new
Telecaptioner redoing show.
What?
Telecaptioner, we're redoing the show.
Oh, Captioner, we are redoing the show.
Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices is made possible in part by Allstate, the Searle Funds at the Chicago Community Trust, and CIBC.
Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices. I'm Phil Ponce. Thank you for sharing part of your weekend with us. On the show tonight, a new grid of bike routes comes to two predominantly Latino neighborhoods. A look at our new push for fairness in transportation. A new Target warehouse opens in Little Village, drawing new job opportunities, but also community concerns. A new report finds Streets and Sands still has some whacking of weeds to do in the city's vacant lots. We have details.
There was a stigma that it was considered a service that was only needed if you were really having a mental breakdown.
And stigmas surrounding mental health in Latino communities, how some are breaking cultural barriers. First off tonight, the city's transportation department has been installing a new grid of bike routes in Belmont, Cragen, and Hermosa, two predominantly Latino neighborhoods on the west side. This expansion also includes new Divvy bike installations. Joining us to discuss how transportation is developing throughout the city and more are Jackie Grimshaw, Vice President for Government Affairs at the Center for Neighborhood Technology. She is also a Transportation Equity Network co-chair. And Linda Lopez, Advocacy Manager for the Active Transportation Alliance. And thank you both for joining us. Linda, let me begin with you. Why is this new expansion important to those communities? What exactly does it do for people?
I think for one, I think it addresses a lot of the issues that local residents and youth in Beaumont, Cragen particularly have been addressing for years around the need for safe bike routes. So I think it addresses needs that have existed. And I think it just gives opportunities for more residents to be engaged in biking safely in their community.
Jackie Grimshaw, in the past there have been concerns, as you know, about the expansion of Divvy, the fact that it appeared that north side neighborhoods were getting Divvy setups first. How would you describe the state of equity in terms of Divvy itself?
Well, I think the Chicago Department of Transportation is trying to address the inequities that exist in the distribution of the Divvy bikes. Also, it's not just distribution, but the cost. And so they have made accommodations in terms of lowering the cost for low-income communities to be able to afford the Divvy.
Linda Lopez, what role does the community typically have in making these decisions? For example, once upon a time, the city was perceived as having kind of a top-down planning mentality. How would you describe community input now?
Yeah, I think this process particularly was pretty unique. I think these processes for transportation improvements can often seem very opaque and can feel inaccessible to local residents. And I think the Beaumont Cragen project particularly, I think there was a lot of engagement from community residents, and they were leading with their own ideas, and I think they had a lot of say in the process. And I think a lot of residents on the Beaumont Cragen task force would agree with that.
What kinds of things matter to the community? What kinds of input did they have?
Yeah, I think they had a chance for one to look at the map of their community and say, hey, I want a bike route in this street. Oh, this street is the infrastructure is not working for people on bikes. I think we need a route, we need a bike lane in that particular street. So I think the looking at the map was also really important, so people could say like how they view their community through their own eyes and experiencing through like biking in their community, through walking their community, just like living in their community. So I think that was really valuable to have residents be able to share that with transportation planners that are going to be bringing these improvements into their community, but might not have that lived experience.
Jackie Grimshaw, what parts of the city still need attention, still need more options, including biking?
I think you can look at the south and the west side, particularly as areas that need more biking. For example, on the north side, there is Milwaukee Avenue that has been created almost as a bicycle highway. Well, on the west side, there's Ogden Avenue, and Ogden needs to have the same kind of infrastructure. Or on the south side, Archer or Vincennes, which are streets that can carry people bicycling safely for commutes rather than just bicycling in neighborhoods for recreation.
Jackie Grimshaw, are there efforts to make some of those streets more of a bicycle highway, as you noted, currently exists on Milwaukee?
Well, the Transportation Equity Network, of which Linda is also a co-chair, was involved with the Chicago Department of Transportation in developing their strategic plan. And the organizations that advised CDOT indicated that they needed more protective bike lanes on the south and west side. And CDOT has committed to implementing the recommendations of the strategic plan. So hopefully, with the capital funding that's available already in the capital plan, as well as the funds that are coming in from the federal government, that we'll be able to create those highways on the south and west side.
Linda Lopez, if those highways come to the south and southwest sides, is there what are the prospects that it would achieve the kind of volume that exists on Milwaukee Avenue, say?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there are a lot of factors in making an area or neighborhood bikeable. I think for one, bike lanes. I think there's also a lot of different factors we have to think about in terms of how people feel safe moving around in their community. And what factors they have to like coexist with. For example, on the southwest side, which I was a Mayor's Bike Advisory Council bike advisory representative, there was a lot of concerns around truck traffic, around like air pollution. Some neighborhoods in the southwest side have some of the most polluted neighborhoods in the city and the state. So I think biking is a lot more than just getting on a bike and going somewhere. It's about, oh, do I want to be biking next to huge trucks? And we see the huge expansion of the Amazon distribution centers on the southwest side particularly. So I think there's just a lot of factors that we need to think about in terms of making people feel safe on a bike. Yes, bike lanes, but bikeability is just so much more than just bike lanes. I think it's a first step, but there's a lot of other things that we need to think about as well.
Jackie Grimshaw, it does sound like it's a little more complicated than just painting a stripe close to the sidewalk and saying, okay, that's for cyclists. But what more, as you look at the big picture, needs to be done to ensure that communities that have historically maybe not gotten the attention that they should have in terms of transportation options, what more has to be done, or how do you go about making sure that it's all fair?
Well, as I said, it starts with the Department of Transportation's strategic plan, and then it's the accountability of the goals that are set forth in that strategic plan. And the community has to believe that the department is going to listen to them. You can't ask people to come out and get involved in a process for transportation planning if they don't believe their input means anything. So that commitment and accountability of the department is very important. And Phil, just to clarify, I'm not talking about painting stripes on the street for bikes. I'm talking about protected bike lanes where the bicyclists are separated from the car and truck traffic.
Got it. Linda Lopez, as we wrap up, as you look at the big picture, what more needs to be done to make sure that communities of color are getting a fair shake in terms of all these options we've been talking about?
Yeah, I think it's going back to some of the points that I made earlier. I think we need to look at biking holistically. As Jackie mentioned, protected bike lanes. Like if you're on the southwest side and there's a protected bike lane and there's a truck on the other side, maybe you're more likely to use that bike lane because you don't feel as afraid. So I think thinking about the environmental factors people have to live with, in addition to affordability, like as you mentioned, divvy expansion into communities around the city, thinking about how we can continue to expand affordable options like divvy for everyone so people can sign up and people can feel like it's an option for them. So I think there's a lot of things that we need to still continue to unravel and work with people to make sure that biking is a possibility for them, and we can think about what other adaptations people need in their own communities to make biking a possibility.
Linda Lopez and Jackie Grimshaw, thank you both. Very much appreciate your insights.
All right. Thank you, Phil.
You bet. Black and brown communities have been disproportionately affected by COVID-19 in both their physical and mental health. Now we'll look at the stigma surrounding mental health in the Hispanic Latino community and what's being done to break those generational barriers by providing services in different ways. Chicago Tonight's Joanna Hernandez has the story.
I mean, growing up, we didn't really speak about how you felt or why you felt things, you know, and often now as a growing up, I'm like, I know I feel something, but I don't know what it is, or I don't know how to explain it to someone else.
For the last 4 years, Ozzy Games and his partner Juan Queseda have been running Plant Shop Chicago in the Albany Park neighborhood. Games was born in Belize, surrounded by nature, and came to Chicago as a child. He never imagined that 31 years later, he would find his way back to his roots.
I started going to garden centers and visiting their houseplant section, or I think there was, a couple of houseplants, plant shops that were available then. And I saw that it helped me. It helped me just kind of clear my mind, pause, leave work at work, come home, to my family. And that helped me a lot. So I basically wanted to take that and put my own twist into it, recreate it, and offer it to whoever wanted to come in.
Ozzy says that nurturing plants is a form of therapy for him, something that he says he's also noticing within his customers, plants helping them with their mental health.
But now that things are reopening back up, you see a new wave of people saying, plants got them through quarantine and got them through being at home, stuck at home. Otherwise, they don't know what they would have done. And having those conversations with people, and you hear stories and they just tend to share things.
Ernestina Perez, a licensed clinical therapist, has made it her mission to help remove the stigma around Latino mental health.
I think a lot of it was just not even having the language to express what was happening. So for example, if somebody's depressed, maybe it's not seen as that, especially back then. There was no real language to say, I think that I'm feeling really stuck, or I'm feeling saddened, or my mood is really down, and I think it's because of something that happened to me.
Last year, she founded Latinx Talk Therapy on Michigan Avenue, where she also offers immigration evaluations with the team of bilingual therapists.
The idea is to really be able to reach out to the community and people be able to see themselves in us and say, oh, maybe I could try, that person looks like me, or they can understand me, and then people being more open to trying therapy at least.
About 16 miles from Perez's practice, Nestor Flores is Director of Behavioral Health Initiatives at Pilsen Wellness Center. He is also on a path to help others identify the symptoms and signs of mental wellness.
In my family, there was a tragedy. When I sought services for myself, for my son, we weren't able to find any culturally sensitive services that really, where we felt supported, where we felt seen. And so that really started me on this journey.
According to the Anxiety and Depression Association of America, only 1 in 5 Latinos with symptoms of a psychological disorder approach a doctor, and only 1 in 10 Latinos approach a mental health professional.
What happens with later generations is that, all of this gets passed on through belief systems that sometimes are verbalized and sometimes they're not.
Flores, who has worked in Pilsen for the last 9 years, says he's slowly starting to see changes.
I would say that 9-10 years ago, that was the case, that there was a stigma, that it was considered service that was only needed if you were really having a mental breakdown. Nowadays, we've done a lot of inroads in the community, we're known in the community, and they know that if someone is struggling with any sort of symptom of depression, anxiety, stress, behavior with children, that they could come to us.
Gamis says his journey with mental health hasn't been easy, but he is taking steps to unpack those traumatic experiences.
It takes a lot of time to explore your mental health, to explore your feelings, to explore, what you want to explain about yourself to the world. That growing up in a country that you aren't native to, you fill those empty spaces with work.
Ozzy Gamis is creating a space for others to learn about plants while discovering his own voice in a world where he once felt silenced.
I'm a father, my daughter's 4, and I think having a daughter or just a child kind of helps with that, because that's something you're teaching them and it's something they are learning.
For Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices, I'm Joanna Hernandez.
And places like the Pilsen Wellness Center are taking the extra step of recruiting therapists from countries like Mexico and Colombia in an effort to better connect with clients. Up next, Paris shuts in a new warehouse in Little Village, causing some community concern. That's a conversation recorded earlier.
You may remember that controversial smokestack implosion in Little Village last year. It was all to make way for a new Target warehouse facility that opened last week on the site owned by Hilco. It's the largest supply chain facility in the U.S. and is expected to support more than 80 Chicago area Target stores. But this new warehouse has sparked more protests among some residents in the Little Village community that say they don't want it there. And joining us to discuss the impact on the community and more are Edith Tovar, a community organizer with the Little Village Environmental Justice Organization, and Alderman Michael Rodriguez of the 22nd Ward. We also invited Target to join this conversation, but the company said it is not able to comment at this time, but we do welcome the two of you here. Edith, I'll start with you. There was a protest last week at the grand opening of this facility. What are you and some of your fellow residents concerned with?
Well, it's an ongoing concern, right? This warehouse facility is a continuation of the toxic legacy that the former Crawford coal plant has left behind. We are still seeing the coal plant effects, right? And so with the shutdown of the coal plant that took 12 years, right, to shut down, we are seeing the continuation from coal to diesel pollution. So we are literally exchanging one pollution to the other, and to be sold, right?
And you're basically, the diesel pollution is coming from the trucks that are coming in and out of the warehouse.
Absolutely. I mean, the warehouse hasn't been in operation yet, but we have been doing truck counting since earlier in July, and we are seeing 2 diesel trucks per minute in the intersection of 31st and Pulaski. So to say that, the warehouse is not going to cause as much pollution because they won't be going through residential areas still doesn't deny the fact that air pollution is not stagnant. It travels. It does not identify property lines. It will not stay within property lines. So the worry is still the same, is that Little Village continues to be a sacrifice zone. And we really want Target to no longer be part of Exchange 55. We want them to break ways.
They did just open there in that site owned by Hilco, which had owned that property for a while. Alderman Rodriguez, are there net benefits to this facility in Little Village?
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Paris, for having me on. And I thank Edith and Alberto for their advocacy. Their work has really pushed the agenda here in our community. We need to be thinking about a Green New Deal in our country. And the fact is that we need to be thinking about good paying career-oriented jobs. The fact is that this facility was approved prior to me coming here. I'm dealing with the reality. They are going to be here. It's inevitable. They've opened their doors. So we need to figure out how to keep them accountable to our community. So there are some potential benefits here. They will be hiring up to 2,000 individuals at this location. We need to make sure that as many of those jobs as possible go to community residents from around the neighborhood, from our zip code and from zip codes.
How can you do that? How can you make sure that they hire a lot of people from Little Village?
Yeah, so we've been pushing them. There's been a table of community organizations that have been meeting with Target for some months now. We got them to agree to meet weekly. And one of the concessions, one of the negotiating points that we had with them is that we wanted them to do at least two targeted job fairs here in our community. Those job fairs will be on Thursday and Saturday as they ramp up their hiring. My understanding is they've hired several hundred people, but many more to be hired. We want to make sure as many of those jobs go to our residents in the southwest side of Chicago as possible.
Edith Tovar, as I understand, that these jobs would start at $18 an hour, decent wages. Does that blunt some of your concerns if they hire in the community and they pay decent wages?
No, Target Corporation is a multi-billion-dollar corporation, and a livable, thriving wage here in Chicago especially, it's above $20. We also know that warehousing jobs are dangerous, labor-intensive jobs. So why do we want our neighbors to be participating in that type of extractive labor? We're not also here to deny and to look down at these type of jobs. A job's a job. So what we are trying to do now with with neighbors, right, who are seriously concerned, we want to also be advocating for these workers. We want them to know about their workers' rights. We want them to know that Chicago is a union town. If these workers want to form a union, let's support them and let's do that. Target shouldn't be wasting millions of dollars every year to bust unions that are forming in different warehouses across the country. So that itself is worrisome.
All right, Alderman Rodriguez, there's also the environmental issues that Edith brought up, namely diesel exhaust from the trucks coming into the communities, and Edith mentioned that they are banned from going on residential streets there, but that exhaust can travel into the residential areas. So how do you address those concerns?
Well, a couple of things. One is I couldn't agree with Edith more about union rates and what a living wage is, things of that nature. So I want to stress that I'm totally supportive of those efforts if the workers try to go that route, which I hope they do make sure they exercise all the rights that they have. But I'd say the following, I think it's easy to go to war, but I prefer to talk and negotiate. The fact is it's inevitable that Target will be here. They have what they need to come here. We need to make sure that people are educated, that we have folks from the neighborhood hired, but also it was no small task to be able to get the agreements that Target trucks would not come into the neighborhood. Folks are exactly right. Diesel fuel does seep into communities via the air. But one thing we knew from the community, hearing the community, was that those trucks should not be coming into our neighborhood. I live 5 blocks from the site. We've got entirely too many trucks coming into our community. We've got an agreement with them that those trucks won't come in. But when it comes to the air pollution, part of the reason that I was against the air quality ordinance earlier in this term is because I didn't think it went far enough. The fact is we need to be holding corporations accountable. They need to be accountable to our communities. I will continue to work with a number of groups to make that happen. As a matter of fact, join Alderman LaSpada in introducing ordinance that would take stimulus funds and help to retrofit diesel fleets in our city. I think we need to be doing much more at the state and federal level to make sure that we are changing our distribution system. It needs to leave the old economy and go to the new green economy.
All right, a lot to talk about there in Little Village, and we've been following this for the last year and a half, and we'll continue to follow it. But for now, our thanks to Edith Tovar and Alderman Mike Rodriguez. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
There's more Chicago Tonight Latino Voices just ahead, so please stay with us.
A year after the city's watchdog said Chicago's Department of Streets and Sanitation was falling behind on clearing vacant lots of weeds, A new follow-up report says the department still has some whacking to do. WTTW News reporter Patty Wetley joins us now with more details. Patty, remind us what the original audit from 2020 found.
Yeah, so the original audit found that Streets and Sands process was fairly inefficient. That too many requests were simply being made by ward superintendents just driving around their wards, that there wasn't clear communication of performance standards, and that there actually was no database of city-owned vacant lots for Streets and Sand to consult in terms of getting these lots mowed on a frequent basis. So lots of inefficiencies.
So did Streets and Sand implement any of the recommendations that were made in the report?
Well, the Inspector General made roughly 7 recommendations, and Streets and Sand has fully implemented one of them, partially a second one, and still has quite a bit of work to do on some of the other ones, but they are getting credit for, having the amount of time that they give their staff and contractors to mow these weeds down to 21 days to respond to a request. And they're also working on implementing a new database so that they will have a list of all of those vacant lots and more routinely give them a pass.
Got it, Patty. Thank you for that update.
Thanks, Bill.
And you can read Patty's full story on our website, where you can also find the report itself. That's WTTW.com/news. And that is our show for this Saturday night. Be sure to check out our website, WTTW.com/news, for the very latest from WTTW News, including details on the state's masking guidelines. And join Brandis Friedman tomorrow night for Chicago Tonight, Black Voices. She'll have an intimate conversation about gun violence with a Chicago mother whose son was recently killed. Plus, the last word on efforts to move the country toward racial justice. And next week on Latino Voices, Univision's Alex Hernandez will be your host. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices, I'm Phil Ponce. Thank you for sharing part of your weekend with us. Stay healthy, stay safe, and buenas noches.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that supports free educational initiatives in the legal profession.